So, as I said yesterday, I am spoilt for choice when it comes to articles, but frustratingly enough, um, Robert Jenrick wrote a piece in the Times about why the Conservatives lost, and I really wanted to go over that. And frustratingly, um, it's now behind the Times paywall, and it's like, curse, curse you, paywall. I'm a normal trick to get through it doesn't unfortunately seem to be working. So I don't know. Maybe if anyone fancies, or does happen to know someone and could just do a little, copy and paste. But anyway, that's a bit naughty asking that. But but for those of you who are interested in that, and if we don't get a chance to do it, the TDLR is that we didn't do anything apart from getting Brexit done. So Jerrick essentially labels the entire Conservative Party lazy, even though they had a big working majority to do stuff with. They didn't do anything with it when they could have. It's just that the party fragmented just that much. And honestly, he does come across as calling the Conservative Party incredibly lazy, but unfortunately, can't bring you that today. However, never fear, because as I said, we are spoilt for choice. And today I am going to bring you some bagels because we are going to go over the former MP, also former Conservative MP, Neil O'Brien's theory as to why the Conservative lost. And believe it or not, it's what he has dubbed his everything bagel theory. So, Robert Jenrick, we didn't do enough. Versus now we've got Neil O'Brien, so we're going to go through now that, we just did everything. But before we do go getting into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my sort of Patreon page, the notification called Buy Me Coffee with QR, Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel. That way, even if you do, just click the like and share. So let's crack on then into this. This is his Substack, and it is the Everything Bagel, the theory of the Conservative defeat of 2024 and what to do about it. So, here's what he says. Did we lose because we were too right-wing or too left-wing? Both, says O'Brien. Did we lose because of the behavior of people at the top or because we're unhappy with our performance? Both. Were we unlucky with COVID and the Ukraine/energy crisis, or did we make our own misfortune? Both. Everything. Everything. Anyway, over recent weeks, I have since spoken to literally thousands of my constituents. If you knock on every door, in a heck of a lot of these streets, you will have a lot of very interesting conversations which reveal the very tricky task facing the party. Different MPs in different places will have had very different experiences, but mine is pretty representative. Our area includes the edge of a city, a town, and some villages. We're in the middle of the country, right in the middle of the pack in most ways. I met plenty of people put off by Partygate, Bernard Castle, and the disunity, and too many changes of PM. There are also a chunk of people who are traditionally conservative because they see us as the, quote, serious grown-ups, eat your greens, balance the books party, and the recent events of recent years have put many of them off. Actually sort of being incredibly honest there. Incredibly honest, he was being, Neil, about that. And Partygate, everything that went on in COVID really cut through deep. Really cut through deep. And remember, there were a lot of conservatives saying at the time, we hope this doesn't, stick. We hope this doesn't continue to the election. Well, yeah, it continued to the election in a very, very significant way. And of course, the fact that they just lost complete control. They lost all seriousness about this stuff. But there you go. So I also met plenty of people, he continues, who were just a bit depressed about the state of the country. A big chunk of people would volunteer that this was because of COVID and Ukraine, but many others have forgotten this and they see only the problems that they have caused. Something that is definitely emerging in this, by the way, like I say, a narrative is clearly forming, certainly around COVID and Ukraine, that there were problems created by those two things, and this is what ends up with us losing. But my response to always this, whenever this starts to sort of come up, is, well, okay, how did you actually tackle those problems? What did your government do to tackle those problems? And ultimately, really, when you look at it, you come back and you have a party that really failed to even deal with some of these problems, even the long-term issues that these problems were going to cause. And yet, here we are, not even mentioning it. And I have to really wonder, someone's going to mention of Brexit to him. Someone has to have mentioned Brexit to him. I cannot believe no one mentioned Brexit. Absolutely. All of this issue so far, cannot believe no one mentioned any of the Brexit problems. But hey, maybe he just didn't want to bring that up. So, here and far and away have now been the three biggest policy issues that there were: NHS, immigration, and the cost of living. As it happens, those are the top three issues named in the polls too. So, after those big ones, there were then a string of other things that came up. For many Conservative voters, potholes were the top of their mind. Gaza was the biggest issue at the Leicester end. I also got yelled at in the street about 3 times. Schools came up a bit, particularly special needs. Also, Labour's plans for VAT on independent schools. Crime and disorder were another, particularly things like knife crime. And here's the thing: you were in power for that long with a quite a sizable majority. What did you do about all those problems? What did you do? At any election, an MP has to answer not only for them but also their party in many ways. And it does seem like they really had nothing to come back with, that even they knew their record really wasn't that very good for like 14 years in power. Not a whole lot of achievements. Not a whole lot of achievements for it. And otherwise, you'd think he would be saying about those achievements, but there you go. So, in the Westminster Village, people still too often think that there are now only one set of voters who care about the NHS, and of course, the different set of people who want to cut immigration. In reality, they do mainly overlap. Indeed, many people I spoke to directly connected the two issues. More issue equals more pressures on services. That's not just it, though. One of the biggest pressures facing the NHS is our increasingly aging population. That easily right now is the biggest pressure the NHS faces. There is a reason why almost every winter, even before COVID, the NHS really struggled with the amount of flu patients who, guess what, were old age OAPs. And this is where, once again, you see this whole thing of, here's a problem, must be immigration. So again, it's not. They're deeper than this. But once again, this is the simple, easy explanation that gets sold to people. And it's, how do we combat it? How do we sort of go back against it? But this is the challenge as old as time in many respects. But there you go. He continues, I also met endless people who are on one hand very culturally and socially conservative on migration, culture, and climb, but also worried about schools, hospitals, councils, and the state of the roads and town centres. Appealing to these voters was the winning combo for both Blair and then Boris in 2019. And what did you do? You know, you couldn't really run on your promise to level up the country because you really didn't achieve that. You didn't achieve any of the leveling up promises that you set out to achieve in 2019. And there are a number of conservatives that have put out this idea that if they hadn't changed Boris, that if they'd stuck with Boris, they'd have won, although we wouldn't be in this situation. How would Boris be managing to bumble his way through not fulfilling his leveling up promises? You know, he would be in as just as bad a position as you saw Rishi Sunak, you know, throughout this campaign. Absolutely throughout this campaign. No doubt in my mind. But there we go. But of course, in 2024, we now appeared to many voters to be drifting on the brink. This is why, when I say we were both too left wing and too right wing, again, we were just too left wing, but we're also too right wing as well. Meanwhile, of course, you look at how the government acted, and instantly, anyone could recognize it as easily the most right wing government we have had in a long time. So I don't know where he means that, oh, we were just too left wing. Left wing on what? I would love to know what issues he means by being too left wing on. We'll see if we get that. So we were also elected on multiple occasions, promising to reduce immigration, but increasing it to its now record high. Boris Johnson introduced the new liberal system, which made numbers explode. Liz Truss wanted to liberalise it even further. Rishi moved excruciatingly slow to deal with this, even as the numbers reached record high. Even in the delays of the last dying days of Parliament, we were having to have an argument about the post-study work visa. Too many people in government thought it far more important to fight for their departmental position than to keep one of our most important pledges to voters. So I love it. Boris Johnson, far too liberal. Liz Truss, far too liberal. When under Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, we saw the immigration system become a lot more right wing, like a lot more right wing. So to many of those I spoke to who are now considering voting reform, this raised, of course, the small boats crisis with a very much mix of anger, frustration, and bewilderment. I heard it again and again. You said you would stop the boats, and you haven't. They literally couldn't understand why not. And yet you failed to do that. You've really failed to explain to that. This was a situation where the Conservative Party ended up dancing to Farage's tune on this. Like, you danced to his tune and you fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Where the reality was, if you had acted sensibly and pragmatic on it, you could have solved this. You could have stopped the small boats, because we've said it, I don't know how many times on this channel, the easiest way to do it, set up a safe route. No more small boats. You know? But there you go. So Labour's share of the vote only went up by 0.6 again. And you can say that we mainly got obliterated simply because we lost a stack of votes to reform over this issue. To those of us who have now been pushing for a stronger line, this was hardly a surprise. And yet, you were chasing what I've said and others have said as well, is a very actually small percentage share of the vote. You know, in many of these cases, here, one of these people, you know, how many actually switched? You know, how many switched to Conservative to Reform? But also, how many switched from the Conservative to either Labour or the Lib Dems? They're putting a lot of attention on reform, but they're not also paying attention to switches from like Labour or to who went to the Lib Dems. So they're not paying a lot of attention to this. But you've also got to ask the question, how many of these people were, first of all, committed reform voters? Now, of course, it says it went up by about 12%. But how many people were committed reform voters? Was it really that 14%? Was it really, 10%, 7%? But as we've seen a lot of people talking about this upcoming future leadership contest, a lot of people are saying instantly they need to deal with reform, not anything else, or have any introspective look or anything like that. We need to deal with reform because they know that as long as that continues, as long as reform is like stealing that amount of vote share, they ain't going to win. The right wing vote there has been split dramatically, and they are now trying to figure out how to try and do that. So we're probably about to hear how we can, deal with reform. This. Anyway, so an essential step in trying to revive the Conservative Party is trying to win back these lost votes. So you're going to try and out Farage for Farage. That's essentially what you've been trying to do for the last couple of years. Good luck with that. To do this, it is essential that we show we are, quote, under new management on the immigration issue, which many people do feel betrayed. I've written before about how the buildup of the UCHR case law is now making it either more or less impossible to solve the small boats issue. And bear in mind, it is because they are obsessed with sending people to Rwanda. If only we could, send people to Rwanda and just ignore our international obligations, everything would have been fine. And of course, moving to now support exit from the European Court of Human Rights would be one way to restore trust with these voters. And this, in a practical way, is to actually solve the issue. No, it's not. It's really not. Leaving the European Court of Human Rights would not solve this issue. It would not solve it at all. It is a ridiculous, stupid move that is once again being offered up as a simple solution to solving what is actually a complex problem. Starmer's plan, which now amounts to be nice to the French, let more in legally, and better enforcement, will fail. What if it doesn't? What if it actually succeeds? At that point, voters will now look elsewhere for answers, and we need to be the ones providing them. Yet, there is now a very tricky balance to pull off. Whoever our next leader is must now win back voters from reform on the right, but also who have now flowed to Labour, the Lib Dems, the Greens, or not voting. I would argue, trying to get that back, that lost vote to the Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, or not voting, is the far bigger issue facing the Conservative Party. Far, far more of an issue, because if you invite Nigel Farage, guess what? There's probably going to be an even bigger flow to Labour, Lib Dems, and the other parties as well. The Greens did take 2 seats from the Conservatives, which, again, hey, very good. Congratulations to them. I won't, take away, a victory where it's due, but now they've also got to perform as well. They're going to be becoming under a lot of increasing media spotlights, and I talked about it before, but there's a lot of things the Greens are not really too good on when it comes to it, foreign policy being one. And there's a lot of stuff internal with their own party, which might get brought to light as well, which they're not going to like talking about, but there you go. They're going to have to, and they're going to have to deal with it. But there you go. So back to this. For these voters, we need to demonstrate that, one, we actually care and have a plan for public services, above all for the NHS. And again, what is that going to be? 2, we are now generally a level-headed bunch and have a plan for the economy. again, which is what, other than cutting taxes, which ultimately they are just going to go back to. They're going to sing. I can guarantee you almost immediately in the leadership contest, every single candidate is going to be cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes, because that's all they know, because they are so ideologically driven. There's going to be no moments for introspection, because we've said it all the time. You know, they follow their ideology to a key. If anything goes wrong or anything like that, it's not their ideology. It must be because we're not doing it hard enough. Anyway, there is, of course, some tension here between winning back the voters lost to reform and those lost to the other to the left parties on non-voting. But these tensions can also be exaggerated. Now, I could write you a very technocratic plan of the NHS, and it's full of things. I would like to help improve it. I would like to follow the Hewitt Review and the NHS plan and try and shift the balance of resources to primary care and provision. We would reform GP remuneration, liberalise the ARRS and the QWOF, and try to drive growth for the NHS health check. We'd also try and drive the uptake of productivity enhancing technology. But in truth, voters are unlikely to be interested in much of this. What voters really do care about is, can they go see a doctor? How quickly can they go see it? How quickly and how fast can they go and get treatment? That is what voters care about. Like it or not, all this technocratic, nitty gritty that he's just mentioned ain't going to be too much of interest to the voters, because at the end of the day, it is, can I go see my doctor tomorrow, or can I go see them this week? And if I do need treatment, how quickly can I get it from my local hospital? That's what voters really care about. So back to this. So we did actually deliver on a 2019 manifesto promise, like the 15,000 extra nurses and the 50 million extra GP appointments. But partly because of COVID and partly because of strikes and partly because of an aging society, people did not feel the health service was in a good place. Yeah, because there was a lot more problems than just getting extra numbers of people in there, extra GPs, extra all this. I see you blaming the strikes. By the way, something else that got reported apparently, I think it's the British, I can't really call it out, the BJM, the doctors union, has said that the young doctor strike could be solved very quickly, because guess what? West Streeting is negotiating with them. Only what they've been saying for ages, and of course what the Conservatives have been refusing to do. Imagine my shock. Anyway, so to make voters look at us again, we need to have a very simple headline answer to quote why the NHS will be better under us. Well, you've had 14 years of that. You need to come up with a very, very good answer. My suggestion would be that we should promise to take a large chunk of money out of the aid budget, 15 billion a year in 2023, and put it into health and social care. We could then focus this money on improving access to GPs, far and away the bits of the NHS which most people interact with the most common. And here's the thing, you can't just put it into one area and just say that's fixed. That's fixed, because then what comes after? You can't just fix one, you can't just tighten one bolt on something and then go, all right, that's it, that's safe. Because what about all the other bolts that you've got to tighten as well, or put on, or screw in? He doesn't even realize it, but he's just recommended what the Conservatives have just done, which is complete sticking plaster policies. Oh, we'll just put a plaster over this and hope it lasts, hopes that solves the problem. Meanwhile, of course, you put a plaster over this massive crack, and in the hopes that somehow one plaster solves that. It doesn't. But there you go. I should also pledge would speak to both reform-minded and centrist voters. Cutting aid to cut tax, I don't think would work. Cutting aid to fund the NHS would. You want to reduce immigration, my friend? Cutting the foreign aid budget would only increase immigration. The foreign aid budget, not only from us, but around the world, goes to countries that are very poor, very underdeveloped. And guess what? It helps improve those areas, helps improve, the local economy, helps build local infrastructure in these places. So then people don't feel like they have to emigrate to have a better life where they could, potentially have it in their own country. So cutting the foreign aid budget and saying, oh, it's somehow going to be fine, causes a lot of other problems for immigration, which apparently you've just cited as the number one reason why people are citing such big problems with the NHS. Again, it's the theory of everything, Bagel. Anyway. So back to it. So at the same time, we need to build our reputation with boring, centrist, square, sensible, small c conservative voters on the economy. And again, all you mean is just cutting taxes where you say small c conservative. There will also be opportunities on this front. Labour will face some massive decisions in the weeks ahead in the run-up to Reeves' first budget. She is no fool, but her first Mise lecture gave almost no clue as to what her economic plan is beyond the thin. We'll find out very soon. Will Labour, quote, get their disappointments in early, break their tax pledges, or try to squeeze huge sums out of 1/4 of the tax base? Or do they go for something much more incremental, which is with the risk that they will have to come back for more later? So, tax the rich, that 1/4 of the tax base, there's a lot of money that you could get out of them. There's also other things that they could do as well. We've spoken about on this channel before. Richard Murphy, that's it, has an amazing blog on what Rachel Reeves could do on that. So, yeah. Fighting on two fronts is very difficult, but the Conservatives now have to. Whoever our next leader is will need a very great skill to now simultaneously win voters back from reform on one hand, while trying to track them back from the centre and the sofa on the other. The great balancing act is going to be almost next to impossible. Next to impossible. And yet, let's see what some of the comments he's got. So I like this straight away. Well, choose. Are you what lots of ex-Tory voters thought you were? A right-wing party or not? Are you broadly against what Labour want to do or not? And once you've chosen, try and convince us. Yet more money for the NHS, yet more public sector employees, yet more resources allocated by the state. Where's the deregulation? Low taxes for business, trying to innovate. Freedom of speech guarantees. Again, not very good on that one, is he? Richard North, he says, great article, but your graphic proves that many voters lost to the Lib Dems and the Greens are just a drop in the ocean compared to the numbers lost to Reform, and of course staying at home. But you can't deal with any losses to the Greens by telling voters what Greens are really like. Someone else recommending government strategy. Here we are. With the quotation of why the NHS will be better under us. Yeah, great if you can actually answer it. But can you, or indeed anybody? Someone else said, excellent blog. No mention of culture war issues here, though. Surely the toughest issue, alongside net zero, on which most efficiently triangulate between the Green, Lib, and Labour versus Reform votes, unless you actually consider it a fringe issue versus immigration/the NHS, in which one case has to now wonder why is it such an issue of the last 2 weeks of Conservative rhetoric. Honestly, his theory of everything bagel once again just goes to show you why the Conservatives are in such a mess. Because I'll tell you what, apart from where I said there seems to be this narrative emerging around sort of COVID and Ukraine, there is not one common thread where all these people have written these articles have agreed on one thing yet. They agree on like reform's a problem, but they can't accurately predict, accurately say, or even are saying why reform is such a problem and how exactly are they going to do that. Because guess what? Rishi Sunak spent a lot of this time and a lot of the Conservative campaign trying to chase after those reform voters. Turns out that didn't work. You notice him not bringing that up. But yes, that was the theory of everything bagel by Neil O'Brien. So let me know what you think down below. But honestly, as I said before, we are spoilt for choice for the theories of why the Conservatives were defeated. And so far, there is no thread that they're latching onto. And soon we're going to do maybe Boris Johnson's how they can come back and defeat Labour, which is again interesting from Boris Johnson. But there you go. But as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.